Week 1 of spring football is in the book. So, who were the biggest winners for the Utes? And Utah women's basketball fell to LSU in the Sweet 16. We're talking about that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, at the time I just hit record, we are 5 subscribers away from 1,000. So if you guys could like or subscribe to this and help us get over the hump, that would be much appreciated. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, we're going to be talking all things Utah women's basketball as their season came to a close, unfortunately, a little bit on Utah gymnastics and the big week they have ahead. But we have to start with Utah spring ball. And in order to help us talk all things Utah spring ball, it's friend of the show and Ute Zone contributor Sammy Mora. Sammy, starting with the biggest winners, I think the first one I'm going to go with is Brandon Rose. I've heard there's been a lot of noise about Brandon Rose, but I think just seeing him out there, seeing him in person, seeing the throws, I believe it was he made the very first throw we got when they finally let us in to see practice, finding Devon Vele in the corner of the end zone. Just a really nice throw. Also kind of an underrated winner just because we know what Devon Vele is, but Devon Vele made 2 or 3 just wow catches that just is kind of that reminder of why he is such a beast receiver. So I think Brandon Rose would be my main winner for the offense, though. Like I said, I was so impressed with his accuracy and what he displayed. And I think the other guy I mentioned for winner, if I'm looking at defense, is Justin Medlock. It was great to see him out there starting, flying around. You can tell he's gotten bigger physically. He looked very comfortable out there. And look, Leavon Demouni will be added to this team later this summer, so he can kind of get going in fall camp and get ramped up. But I think Justin Medlock might push him a little bit for that. And obviously this will be his second year in the system. He feels very comfortable in it, and it was great to see him out there. But especially Medlock and Rose are kind of the 2 biggest winners that jump out to me. I know we only get to see the first 20 minutes of practice, but just even hearing the coaches talk about those guys, you can tell how encouraged they are about their progress.
Yeah, I think all of the quarterbacks are a big winner in this situation. Obviously, having Cam not out there for spring ball sucks big time. But you're getting these guys a lot more experience. Like Nate Johnson, you got to remember this is his first spring ball that he's been a part of. He came in last summer, so he hasn't been used to this whole spring process. But I think all of the quarterbacks are the big winners in this because you're not splitting time with your ones. They're not sharing time with Cam. They are out there to show why they should be the number 2 quarterback on this team. And I think they are all huge winners in that, in my opinion, just because we saw 20 minutes of practice and the refs were kind of evenly distributed amongst Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson, Brandon Rose, and Luke Bookback. I can never pronounce his last name correctly. But they were split between the 4 of them, and so I think that it's a good look that and I obviously as we get later and later into spring ball, we will start to see more of a separation of who is taking reps with who, because Nate for one series was taking reps with the 1s, but then the next series he was taking reps with the 2s.
Yeah. So
you just it's so early in on this spring ball thing, and you got to remember we only get to view practice once a week as media during this season. Sorry, but I think the quarterbacks are a really big winner for me. I also think you got to be super impressed with what Spencer Fano is doing so far.
Yeah.
He was out there bodying guys on that defensive line. And of course he's a freshman and there's going to be some moments where he's not playing the greatest, or he's having some lapses in judgment, or just growth troubles, I want to say, he's not his and it's his first year of the program. A lot of people have said that Ludwig's offense is so complex and so crazy that it takes a year or 2 for kids to start fully processing it.
Yes.
And I think that if we see Fano this season, I think it's going to be because he hit the ground running. He already did. When we saw him measure in at what he measured in at, that this was going to be he was here to play. And I think as spring develops, again, this is going to be one of those situations where you see development happening and you see guys earning more reps, because obviously you lose Paul Miley to BYU, and then you also lose Braden Daniels to the draft. So there's 2 guys that are gone. And yeah, you had some guys step up in that center position when Paul went down, mainly Johnny Maea and Koli Fianu, which again, I apologize if I pronounced Koli's last name wrong. But those 2 stepped up big time and there wasn't a lot of drop off, but you still have the center position looming large, and then you also have replacing Braden Daniels, which I think is a task that's easier said than done.
Yes.
Just based off what Braden meant to this offensive line and what he was able to do. That's something that I think is not it's not talked about a lot. It's not mentioned as much as it should be, but I think that whoever is going to fill in for that Braden Daniels like role, they have big shoes to fill, and I'm excited. You know, we saw a lot of movement during spring ball about who was on that one offensive line. So, you know, it's kind of hard to tell where people are going to be lining up. You know, you had Jaron Kump lining up at center. So it's going to be interesting to see like what Harding decides to do when that spring game rolls around, and like whatever happens in the spring game at the same time probably won't be what happens during the regular season or during fall camp. So, because pieces are going to be kept being added, pieces might leave after spring ball. So you got to just remember and take it with a grain of salt when you're looking at spring ball and depth and stuff like that, because this is still very fluid. I think, in my opinion, this whole roster, not whole roster, I think there's pieces that are like 100% locked in, but I think there's guys down the depth chart that might reconsider.
Oh, definitely. We just saw that before with Clayton Isbell.
Yeah. Well, the Clayton Isbell thing just came out of left field, fully left field. And I think that's something else that's like a big looming thing, is like who's going to take over for him, because everyone was under the impression that he was going to be the dude this year and kind of replace I forgot RJ Hubert. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, replace RJ and just get it going. But obviously that's not happening. So
yeah, it is interesting with the safety spots, especially because look, Nate Ritchie's not ready to go. That was one of the very interesting things. Like Coach Witt is usually really tight-lipped about that kind of stuff, but someone asked him and he spoke very openly about like, yeah, we're still just getting Nate back up to speed. You know, he served his mission. Like it just takes
mission legs, as they call it. He's got mission legs, and so I think. Well, and also like Nate came home early. Like I think that that's something that shows how much he wants to get back out there.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, he came back like beginning of the year, so. It's going to be interesting to see when he gets into shape. Like I fully expect to see him back out there at some point during the spring ball camp, like spring ball camp, this spring camp. But I don't know, like maybe we'll see it next week. Maybe we'll see it after that. And the thing is I don't think the defensive scheme has changed that much since he went on his mission.
No, it hasn't. Yeah, it's been very.
So I think it's just going to be a lot of like reminding himself of what's going on.
It's more so physical than anything else, I think.
It probably is. It also probably is very much a physical aspect of this, because you have those guys that go on missions who are able to make gyms in their host families' houses, or they're able to still work out and stuff, but it's kind of dependent on like what each guy, what like hand each kid was dealt. And so it's like, I think everyone was really excited to see Nate back out there. I mean, I was really excited to see Nate back out there, but at the same time, you know, I'm not super concerned. That's my stance on this whole Nate Ritchie thing, because I know people were like not up in arms, but they're like, oh, like where's Nate? It's like, give him some time. Like he's getting acclimated.
And as excited as we're getting about having football back, it's just spring. We need him to go come fall. And that's a long way away from right now.
Just like, it's like football's back, so we can finally like have like something to talk about again. But at the same time, it's like every single year you have to take spring football with a grain of salt.
Oh, yes.
There's always one or two guys that performs so well during spring camp, and then when you get to fall camp, they just have like fallen off the face of the earth. So you need and I think this spring is very much a spring for development of younger guys, because this is a very veteran heavy team. It's a very upperclassman heavy team with a lot of guys that are potentially going to leave at the end of this season, this 2023 season. So in my opinion, this is a season of like getting these younger guys into the program, getting them acclimated. Even some of the guys that have been in this program for a couple of years, like getting them some more experience underneath their belts, because that's never too bad. Like, experience is not something that's wasted in the Pac-12, especially with how dog eat dog it is and how how we just eat each other alive in the Pac-12, as people say. That experience pays dividends when you are down a couple offensive linemen, or you're down a couple wide receivers, or you're down a couple corners or safeties or whatever. Having those guys that have had that practice experience and getting those reps is key. And like, yeah, I know people are gonna be like, but game time experience is different. I know that, and that's the thing, is I think Utah's gonna have some games.
Start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and Utah's gonna have some games where they're gonna be in dead time, where they're gonna be in garbage time, and I would not be surprised if you see whoever QB2 is trotting out there on the field with the number 2 offensive line and the number 2 receiving group, and then like you're just gonna see the 2s out there. And if it gets bad enough, you'll maybe even see the 3s or the 4s, depending on how
when injuries take effect.
Injuries, and also how much if Utah's up big and Kyle Whittingham pulls out his starters and he puts his second string in, and his second string still scores a lot of points in the limited amount of time they're in, then those 3s are going to go in. And if the 3s are scoring, like there's only so much Kyle can do. He can't just kind of go up to the team and be like, okay, well, time to stop scoring.
Exactly.
Like, that's not who Kyle Whittingham is. And I think that's something else that like just like needs to be like put out there. Is like, yeah, some of these guys are gonna get time, like dead time, like garbage time. So
But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. After the holidays we've gotten through, I know I'm still trying to keep up with my New Year's resolution, and what's allowed me to do that is to continue staying with Built Bar. They're healthy, and it's actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolutions. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it. These bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros, and what's even better is they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've talked about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. Now you can go ahead to your local Sifts or Sam's Club and get them there. That's right. Head to your nearest Smith's or Sam's Club today and grab yourself a box of Built bars. Or once again, head to Built.com to get in on those great deals from Built Bar. Also, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at UCCU. It's the perfect time to open a low-rate home equity line of credit from UCCU. Over time, the value of your home goes up as you make payments. The balance you owe goes down. The space in between is equity, and it's yours. A UCCU home equity line of credit can put that equity to work for you, like finishing your basement or yard and raising your home's value, or paying off a higher interest loan and getting out of debt faster, or helping with college or weddings, or the peace of mind that just comes from knowing you have a low-rate line of credit ready for whatever, whenever. UCCU will also provide you with your very own home equity Visa card, giving you instant access to your equity. If you already have a home equity with another financial institution, just refinance with UCCU and save. To learn more or to start your application today, visit uccu.com or stop by any branch. UCCU, love where you bank. No, absolutely. And you said a lot there. So unpacking everything. First of all, I think Sione.
Sorry, I didn't say
good.
a
I
lot.
wanted to recap everything because that was all really good. That's why I was saying I wanted to go back on a couple of things. First of all, on Spencer Fano, I think it's outstanding that he is already the backup right tackle. Are you kidding me? This quickly, the backup right tackle. I think that is insane. You mentioned the quarterbacks. I think I will add one caveat to the quarterback thing you mentioned. Everyone's a winner to me except for Bryson, because they already talked about how they're going to give more reps to Nate Johnson and Brandon Rose than Bryson, because they're just like, well, we know who Bryson is. And if I'm Bryson, I'm kind of like, well, dang, I want to kind of just go out there and continue to remind you, like, hey, I beat out Jaquindon last year. I want to beat these guys out again too. So if I'm Bryson, I'm a little bit chapped that I'm not getting a little bit more of an opportunity there overall. But yeah, and I think the safety's back. I'm really excited about Sione Vaki, seeing even more of him. I think the coaches obviously are too. And I think we'll eventually see Nate Ritchie get back up to that level too. Yeah. And it's going to be really interesting to see over spring ball, because as you said, this is a nice opportunity for guys to make plays. I think Isaac Vahi made a really nice catch, or Vaha, made a nice catch over the middle of the field one time. And he's the kind of guy I'm like, he's pretty buried on the tight end depth chart, but next year, I think we could see more of him.
Vaha, I will add this. Vaha has had back-to-back seasons of like season-ending injuries.
Yes.
So it's like for him to be back out there and still pushing is like a win in and of itself, in my opinion, just because when you have two back-to-back seasons of ending injuries, like there's like you could call it, be like, okay,
Mhm.
well, the
Yeah.
cards probably aren't in my favor,
Yeah.
but he's still out there and he's still
Mhm.
pushing and he's still trying and he is an absolute unit.
He is a
Like
unit. That's the one
he,
thing I'm reminded
whew,
of spring football is you get close to these guys, you're like, there are so many units on this team
oh yeah,
in general. And that's where I talked
oh
about
yeah,
like Medlock's transformation. You mentioned units actually, and this is kind of more of a different type of body, but like Miles Battle is just
oh
built like
yeah.
a corner. He's long. He was a guy who the one play we really saw him make it was like a borderline pass interference on the outside. I remember a little bit, but he's just the kind of guy just looking at him. I'm excited to see him out there. And the other last winner I want to throw really quick before we get to read a quick message from our sponsor is Jaquindon Jackson making that nice catch in the end zone. There were a couple key passing plays he was in on when he first made the switch to running back, and he just didn't really look natural as a receiver. And he ran a wheel route, and it was just a beautiful throw. I forgot who made the throw off the top of my head right now, but either way, it was a great job by Jaquindon Holland in the catch. So there's a lot of guys on the spring roster that's really exciting about, and it's going to be great because coming up this Tuesday, we get to view these guys in media practice once again. So it's going to be exciting to see how that pans out for this Utah football team.
I know who threw the wheel route
Who
to
threw the wheel route?
JJ. It was Luke Batari.
It was Luke Patari. There you go. Yeah, that was
Yep.
Luke Patari. That's why I was like, part of me thought it was Brandon maybe, but it definitely was Patari. It was a great throw
It
too.
was a great throw from
Mhm.
Batari,
It's
which
just another reminder about how deep this Utah quarterback
well,
room
and
is
also
because there's no way he's getting in there ever.
he's a really good transfer too. Like he's
Yes.
from like a community college, but he's good.
He's going to be a nice spring, especially like when you're talking about scout team reps and everything. I think that's
Oh
something
yeah.
that's going to be very useful because if you can make kind of the throws that he made on Jaquindon, that one in the end zone too, just not a lot of room for error. It's going to be a good look this team gets each week going forward. Unfortunately,
Also,
once
Mac
yes,
Howard. Put Mac Howard in the
yes,
scout team bubble too, because
Definitely. Yeah. Mac Howard's definitely a guy who contribute on the scout team bubble. And it'll be interesting to see just how these guys do in the rest of spring ball. The quarterback battle will be defining spring camp. And we're going to continue to talk about, I should say, the backup quarterback battle will be defining spring camp. We're going to come back in a second and talk about the Utah women's basketball team, who unfortunately had their season come to an end against LSU. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at FanDuel. The tournament is heating up. We are down to the final four, which is absolutely crazy. And there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to fanduel.com/locked on and sign up today and claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to the point spread to which team will be cutting down the nets. And once again, that's coming up this weekend. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel and get in on all the action. The app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at the no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel. Sammy, the Utah women's basketball team has been an outstanding story this season. They've been a blast to cover and watch. And unfortunately, their season did come to an end in the Sweet 16. It was a great game. They took on LSU. It was a physical battle back and forth. There were tough calls both ways. And in the end, it just didn't end in the Utes' favor. 66-63, LSU now going on to advance to the Final Four with their win today as well. But either way, this was one that came down to the wire. And look, it was a tough loss for Utah. Give LSU credit. They fought hard all game two. But in the end, I'm more focused on what this season overall means for this women's team because, I mean, just what an incredible season it was. I mean, we talked about not losing a game at home, making this deep run to the Sweet 16, being just a few plays overall because no game never comes down to one specific thing. There are so many things over the
Mhm.
course of a game that define it. It's easy just to look at like the very last thing and be like, oh, this is the reason that this happened. But you could go back to so many missed shots, turnovers, misplays. There's lots of things that end up leading to those defeats. And I think sometimes that gets lost and games oftentimes. But either way, it was an incredible season for Lynn Roberts. And the thing that's most exciting about this group, Sammy, is they're all coming back.
Possibly. I'm
Oh,
gonna I'm
possibly.
gonna
There
I'm
you
gonna
go.
caveat
Okay.
that. I'm gonna caveat that with
What you got?
possibly because like yeah, you said like the season was really really good for this team, but there's always that chance that Alyssa Peely does decide to forego and go to the WNBA. But
True.
my stance on
Or
Alyssa
even
Peely,
transfer.
I don't
Yeah.
think she's transferring.
I hope she's not. But like you
I
just said,
don't think
it's
she is.
kind of that caveat of like anyone on the roster, not even like
Anyone
Peely,
on the
just in
roster could
general.
transfer, but
That's a good point.
if
We just got to be cautious of that fact.
if people transfer on the roster, it's gonna be girls who didn't get substantial amounts of
Mhm.
minutes. Like I like Peyton McFarland is one that comes into mind, but Peyton She tore her ACL during the Pac-12 tournament last season,
Mhm.
and so she wasn't available for Lynn's team until midway through conference play. So she got back. She played she didn't play substantial minutes. Like whenever Peely was on the bench, it usually went to Kelsey Reese to go
Mhm.
in there. But I could see a girl like Peyton McFarland possibly transferring out.
Mhm.
I also personally love Peyton McFarland's game a lot better than
Yeah.
Kelsey Reese's.
Mhm.
Just historically this season, Utah's been in the minus with Reese on the court, whereas a couple of times they've had McFarland on there, they've been in the positive. It hasn't been 15, 16 in the positive, but they've been 2 or 3. So that's better than being in the negatives. But
Mhm.
I think, honestly, in my opinion, with going back to Alyssa Peely, I think she comes back
Mhm.
just because she had one really good season, which was her freshman season. Then she was hurt for so her freshman season was the 2020 season. So she was Pac-12 freshman of the year. Great player, amazing player. She was hurt. She was hurt a lot last season, saw less minutes, and that's why she transferred to Utah. And then she has this year where she was Pac-12 player of the year and just tons and tons and tons of accolades. I think she needs another year of film just to prove to the
Mhm.
scouts that this is real and this was not just a one-off of what she can do. And I think, this roster stays intact. You bring back Jenna Johnson, Gianna Neepkins, Izzy Palmer, Ines Vieira. You
Mhm.
bring in you keep the core of this team
Definitely.
together. And you bring in a really good recruiting class. I've talked about this over on utezone.com. You bring in Reese Ross, the number 1 player in the state of South Dakota, Gatorade Player of the Year. And you also bring in a girl who has international minutes in Daniela Falcon. You have really good talent coming in as well. And so I'm not going to be surprised if maybe 1 or 2 girls
Mhm.
goes to the portal. But again, as I mentioned over on Ute Zone, there's been times where people have thought that the world is falling down because the girls have transferred out. Lola Pendante is one who
Yeah.
played a big role in Miami playing
Mhm.
LSU tonight. You have Lola Pendante. You have Brenna Maxwell, who transferred to Gonzaga. You have
Mhm.
Kemry Martin, who transferred to Cal. You have girls who got substantial minutes for Utah.
Yeah, Drew from last season
Drew
too.
Gilton. Well,
Yeah.
Drew's falls in a different category for me because she wanted to go back home and play for one final year for her
That's true.
graduate
I
year.
was more so saying just an important piece from a team that was
Yeah.
absent, and the team was
Mhm.
able to still have, obviously, an
Oh, yeah.
outstanding
Yeah.
season without her.
So Drew is one of those ones that I consider yeah, it's a big loss, but at the same time, you have to see her reasons. She wanted to
Oh,
go
definitely,
home.
yeah.
She wanted to play in front of her family for one final season. But you keep Utah keeping this core together, I think, is the biggest part of this whole team. I also forgot to mention Kennedy McQueen, local Utah girl,
Yeah.
coming back, and I think that this is not just a one-off. That's my take on this
I agree.
situation. You started seeing it build last year with how they finished the season, making it to the Pac-12 championship game in the tournament, making it to the tournament, the big dance, and then losing to Texas in the second round. You got further
Mhm.
ahead this time. You got one round further along. And so I think that this is going to be a motivating thing for next year. We were so close. And like you said, this is not a microcosm of just one event that led to the loss.
Mhm.
Obviously the biggest thing people are going to circle is Jenna Johnson's 2
Yep.
missed field goal or free throws late in the
Mhm.
game, but there were so many traveling calls on Utah that led to empty possessions.
Mhm.
If you don't get those traveling calls, you're probably up. You're probably up a little bit more. And I think at times they kind of took their foot off the gas. I think they said, "Okay, well we're up by a certain amount.
Mhm.
Let's cruise now." And I think LSU is one of those teams you do not want to cruise against,
Yeah.
especially Angel Reese. You do not
Mhm.
want to cruise against her
Very
because
true.
she will make you pay, and she made Utah pay. Um, so I think this is not a one-off because I've seen people who are like, "This is just a one-off," and I've talked about it on Twitter. You bring back possibly your entire roster. You have
Yeah.
a fan base that is bought in all the way
Yes.
now and loves this team.
Good coaching.
Great coaching. Lynn
Yeah.
Roberts
Good
should
coaching.
win
Mhm.
Naismith Coach of the Year, in my
I agree.
opinion. But knowing how this is going to go, it's probably going to go to the Virginia Tech head coach because they
Yeah.
made it to the Elite Eight. But Lynn is fantastic. This assistant coaching staff is great. Like, I want to also give a shout out to Gavin Peterson, who's the associate head coach, because he had the scout on the Stanford game for that final game of the season before the Cal game. Like, they had the Cal game and then they had Stanford the next day. He had that scout report ready for Stanford days in advance. And I think that that's like also like huge, is that you have coaches who are wanting to win.
You mentioned people leaving earlier, by the way. Like, I don't look. I'm sure he's very committed to Utah, but like he would make an exceptional head coach anywhere he wanted to go as well, too. So
anywhere,
it's a great addition having him on the staff.
Oh yeah. So I just think that this Utah women's basketball team is here to stay, for the next bit. I'm gonna say. Because this team is so young. If you look at the lineup,
that's the reason it's crazy to me that people would be like, it's a one-off, just because like, wait, the same pieces are back and you watch the games. It wasn't like, this wasn't some, I brought up TCU before, but TCU football was like running field goal units on the field to win games, like borderline, like crazy things had to happen, go their way. That was not Utah once. You don't go undefeated at home by getting lucky. Like that doesn't happen.
Don't. You don't beat Stanford, Arizona, UCLA.
With what was on the line for Stanford too. It wasn't like Stanford was overlooking them. Like maybe like when Utah men's team beat the Arizona men's team. That was kind of an example of overlooking. This year, like basically de facto regular season Pac-12 championship on the line, and Utah was able to win a share of that on their court. Like that just, like I said, that just doesn't happen by fluke.
Well, and if you look at this Utah roster, you have 3 juniors in your starting 5. Alyssa Peely, Kennedy McQueen's a sophomore. 2 juniors, Izzy Palmer and Alyssa Peely. You have 3 sophomores in Jenna Johnson, Kennedy McQueen, and Gianna Neepkins. So you have that is insane that you have they had no seniors. That's something else that needs to be talked about. They had no seniors. They did not have a senior day celebration because there were none. And that's another reason why I think Alyssa's staying, is because if she was even thinking about leaving, why wasn't she going to be honored for senior day? That's another thing that's like that I think just needs to be acknowledged. Was that. But then if you look at like the bench, like I have said this a million times, Deja Young should have been in the consideration for 6th man of the year for the Pac-12, because what she does for this Utah team goes beyond the stat line. If you can tell that team is lagging, Lynn will throw Deja out there and Deja will get them going.
The energy.
Deja wanted to cover Haley Jones and Cameron Brink in that final Stanford game. Like, she is willing to take on these tasks and these like all-star talents. And so I think Deja Young is a very, very, very big key to this team. And I don't think that's talked about enough, in my opinion. Because everyone just wants to talk about the front 5 and how good they are, which they are fantastic. But Lynn's bench is really good. You got Lonnie White, who started to cook towards the back end of the season as a freshman. You kind of wish you get a little bit more out of Taya Sidbury at times, but again, she's a freshman. There's going to be some like catching up that needs to be done. And Ines Vieira, she was obviously starting at the first half of the season, and then Izzy Palmer kind of beat her out for that starting job. But she plays good minutes when you need her out there. She's the shortest girl on the team, but she is like an energizer bunny, and she will run around the court and just tire you out. But this team is it's so deep and it's so stacked. Like Lynn, I can't remember what game it was, but Lynn went 10 deep, which is like not something you hear of usually with like a lot of programs, someone going 10 deep. I mean, Princeton, for example, they played all of their 5 starters. So they obviously played Utah on a Sunday, and they played North Dakota or NC State on Friday. They played all 5 of their girls for between 30 and 40 minutes. Like, they only had like 3 or 4 girls that they were subbing in, and it was for 2 or 3 minutes max, like was what they were registering. And I think that just shows the trust Lynn has in these girls, is that she's able to go so deep in her roster with it being so young as well.
It's a very special culture too. I mean, you
Oh
just
yeah.
see the chemistry on the TikToks and everything that are all really fun. Like, look, if this team had bad chemistry, you're not doing as many of those kind of videos. And that's
You're
something that
not
shows
you're
how
not
close this
joking
group
about
is.
what their what was the one that came out right before right
Oh,
before it
I
was
don't
like
remember. It was some,
what their problems were.
yeah,
Like you're not like, and that's like a
exactly.
joke. That's like a joke TikTok. That's like a meme.
Mhm,
Like Lonnie's becoming verified on verified, and then she's a whole different person. Like that,
mhm.
you don't joke about that
Yes.
if there's also not a sense of trust and a sense of community, because why would you be poking fun at somebody's insecurities or something that they're doing
Mhm.
if you don't trust them, or if it's
Exactly.
coming from a place of like love or respect or whatever?
Yeah.
But
I would
yeah.
have paid so much money to hear the North Carolina men's basketball team do one of those off the season. They just found each
That
other.
okay, there's a couple of teams that I would have loved to
Yeah.
hear that from, but that is one of them. There's also a couple football teams I would have loved to hear that
Mhm.
from as well.
All right, Sammy, final thing before we go into gymnastics. I didn't know if I was going to talk about this or not, but just because now we're talking about all the exciting things about this Utah women's basketball team, it's still crazy to me that some people can have like not watch a game and then they'll take a Twitter clip and then
Oh,
they'll like
I
bring up
know where this is going.
and question someone's heart or something like that. Because I watched a game where I see two teams competing on both sides. And yes, obviously we're talking about the thing with Jenna Johnson. So I watched Jenna Johnson out there battling for her life down low, trying to get paint
Mhm.
position time and time again, getting thrown on the ground, getting back up every time, fighting tooth and nail. And then someone has the audacity to watch one clip on Twitter and then call out it's laughable. It's disgusting. Honestly, I don't even like really giving it credit. And I'm not going to say who
Well,
even tweeted out, but once again, Jenna and the entire team battled their hearts out all game long. I think it's unbelievably a joke and just really disrespectful and as much PG as I can keep it to call out a player's heart, basically.
and jumping on that, I also wanna commend Lynn
Yes.
for what she
Oh,
did,
what a great leader.
because you see her as soon as Jenna misses those free throws, Jenna is just crying
Mhm.
on the bench, and you see Lynn just, like, put her arm around her and just start
Yep.
talking, and then even post game, Lynn said, "If I had to be in that position again, I would put Jenna back in that
Mhm.
position." You gotta remember that she is a sophomore. She's a
I know.
sophomore in the Sweet 16
Yeah.
battling to get her team into the Elite 8 for,
She's
like,
had some huge games this season.
the first time since, like, 2006, I think is
Mhm.
the last time the women's team was in the Sweet 6 or the Elite 8.
Yeah,
So it's like, this is a learning experience for her, and I
exactly.
bet that if Jenna's in that same position next year, if Sweet 16, Elite 8 on the line, and Jenna's in that same position, I would put money on it that she probably makes
Agreed.
both of those.
Mhm.
Because I honestly think that that is going to be her motivating factor for next year was,
I
"I
agree.
need to prove all these people wrong because they think that I'm this."
And doubting people who have played
Mhm.
significant minutes like she has as freshman and sophomore is not the camp I wanna
Sh
be in, so,
she was, like, Pac-12 all first team when she was
yeah.
a freshman, like,
Mhm.
that's insane. So it's like, you taking one clip out of context is one of my
Exactly.
least favorite things on the
No.
planet, like, I hate it so much.
Yeah, we feel the same way about that, and once again, just hats off to the women's team for an incredible season and so
Yes.
many great plays they made all year long. So, unfortunately, the women's season for basketball has come to an end. Thanks to Sammy Mora for joining us. That's gonna do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Want to remind you guys, for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast, where host Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, you can hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Final Four is here. So make sure you guys listen to Locked On College Basketball to get caught up. The road ends this weekend in March as we finally, or March/April, I should say, because it's got that weird March, April kind of deadline thing. But either way, make sure you guys listen and tune into that. We appreciate you for listening to today's Locked On Utes. Tomorrow, Brian Brown's joining me to talk a bunch of spring ball stuff and also Utah, a little bit of men's basketball because Lazar Stefanovic decided to enter the transfer portal. So all that and more on tomorrow's Locked On Utes. Thank you again for making us your first listen every single day.